Okay, welcome back. So, we're going to move on now to doing actually part 2 and part 3 of this question. And part 3 is calculate machine hour overhead absorption rates for departments 1 and 2. So we've seen in our previous example how to calculate an overhead absorption rate. But before we can do that, we have to do part 2, which is transfer the service department costs to production departments 1 and 2 on the basis of machine hours. And here is the reason why, I guess. If we want to create overhead apportionment rates in order that we charge our customers enough money to cover the costs of all of our expenses or overheads, okay, and we do that using a method where we charge them depending on how many machine hours or labor hours that their job takes in whichever department that we're working in, well then that won't cover any of a service department's overheads, because as you can notice from this question, there are machine hours in production department 1 and 2, but none in service department A and B, because the heavy machinery we're talking about doesn't exist in the HR department or in like the administrative office of the factory. Okay, equally so the labor hours, you know, there might be 1 or 2 administrators in these HR departments, but the majority of the labor hours occurs in the production departments of a company, so, or of a factory or manufacturing company. So our issue first is we want to be able to make sure that, if we just put this down here a second, make sure that we charge our customers enough to cover all of our overheads, not just the overheads from Department 1 and Department 2, but also the overheads in Department A and Department B, which are service departments. Now, in order to do that, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this figure of 9,800 and 8,800 and we're going to add it on to these two figures here. But we're not going to just add this onto Department 1 and this onto Department 2 or vice versa. What we're going to do is we're going to add it on in a specific way, either using our own initiative sometimes, and sometimes we're going to be told exactly how to do it. Okay, so in this particular question, it says transfer the service department costs to production departments 1 and 2 on the basis of machine hours. So we've been doing a lot of apportioning on the basis of certain other things. So this should be no problem to us to do this. So what it's saying is take these total costs here and apportion them to Department 1 and 2 on the basis of Department 1 and 2's machine hours, which is 3,000 and 1,000. So we'll use the exact same method that we used in the last one. So I'll just do the workings first and then we'll show a nice way to write it out. So if it's 3,000 and 1,000, we're going to apportion it. 3,000 is to 1,000. Okay, we add the two of them together. 3,000 and 1,000 is 4,000. We put this over 4,000, over 4,000. And if we want, we can tidy these up, or we can use these big awkward looking fractions here. So if I was to divide above and below by 1,000, this would be 3/4 is to 1/4. Okay, so that's the ratio we're going to use to divide up the costs. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take, all of Department A's costs, 9,800. We're going to take 3/4 of it and we're going to add that onto Department 1's costs, and we're going to take 1/4 of this 9,800 and add it onto Department 2's costs. So also with the 8,800 in Department B, we're going to take 3/4 of that and add it onto Department 1's cost, and 1/4 of it and add it onto Department 2's costs. Is that all right? So what we can do first is maybe work out the figures, and then after that I'll show you a nice way to lay it out. Excuse me. So if we take the 9,800 first of all, which was Department A's costs, multiply it by 3/4, and we get, let me see, I'm going to use the calculator, I think, just to be on the safe side this time. So 9,800 multiplied by 3/4 gives us 7,350, and the same 9,800 multiplied by 1/4 is equal to 2,450. Okay, and if then we take the 8,800 from Department B that we want to split up, it's 8,800 by 3/4, which is equal to, I should be able to do that in my head, 6,600, isn't it? 600, and 8,800 multiplied by 1/4 then is 2,200. Okay, so those are the actual figures, how we tend to write it out, and again, really you're just getting the marks for the figures, so if you write it in a slightly different way, it really doesn't matter, as long as it illustrates exactly what it is that you've done and where the figures are going. So here's one layout anyway, or one method you could use to lay it out. So if I have total cost here, and then I have your Department 1, Department 2, Department A and Department B, Department B, okay, excuse the writing. Okay, and so the total cost was, this was 18,600 first of all, from here. Then we're going to take each of these total costs, so 21,200, 9,800, and 8,800. Okay, and then we have, if you like, apportion, Department A to production departments. Production. Okay, and what we said already is 7,350, or 3/4 of that amount, is going to be added on to Department 1. So 7,350 is there, and 2,450 is going to be added on to Department 2, and 9,800 is going to be subtracted from Department A, if you like. Okay, and then we have apportion, Department B to production. And it's going to be, we said 6,600 is going to be added on to, that's at 6,600 onto Department 1, and 2,200 is going to be added on to Department 2, and 8,800 is going to be taken from Department B. And then if we add this up, totaling this gives me 12,550, 1 and 14, 2, and 3, 2, isn't it? And then adding this up here is going to be 850, isn't it? And hold on, there's something wrong here. That's not right. 2,200. Excuse me, that should have been 21,200. 21,200. Okay, let me add this again. Just make sure, right, 850, 25, isn't it? Okay, fantastic. And if I want, that's 0 and 0 now. So a way of double checking then is you could add the two of these together and make sure that they come to my total 58,400 again. So if you do, you will find that they do come to the 58,400, because you haven't actually gotten rid of any of those overhead costs. You've just reallocated them or reapportioned them to a different department. So now that we have all of our costs in Department 1 and Department 2, we can go on to the next part, which is coming up with an overhead absorption rate for each of Department 1 and Department 2. So let's do that immediately. This is part 3 of the question. And, just before we move on, actually, this was, they told us to transfer the costs on the basis of machine hours, okay? And we did that in the same way as we did the apportioning up above in part 1, okay? Sometimes, on occasion, they will actually give us percentages. They'll say, apportion or transfer the service department cost to production departments, and they'll give you a little table with percentages where it's like 70% to Department 1, 30% to Department 2, and then that could be for Department A's costs, and then for Department B's costs it could be 80% to Department 1, 20% to Department 2, in which case you'd have to just break them up in that in those proportions. Okay, so Part 3 then. Calculate the machine hour overhead absorption rates for departments 1 and 2. And we said in the last video that you do that based on the number of machine hours or the number of labour hours, whichever is greater. We say in accounting, we say whichever one is the dominant activity. So in this case, there are no labour hours given, so the only one you can use is machine hours. But they've told us to use machine hours anyway, calculate machine hour overhead absorption rates. I should mention one thing here as well, because you're going to be doing some more questions in a moment. In some of the solutions you see, you'll see that they don't use the dominant activity to calculate their overhead absorption rates. So in some questions, they'll have machine hours and labour hours, and they'll just say calculate an appropriate overhead absorption rate. They won't tell you to use the machine hours or the labour hours. And what you should always do is use the one which is, if Department 1 had more labour hours than machine hours, you do a labour hour absorption rate. If Department 2 had more machine hours than labour hours, you do a machine hour overhead absorption rate. But the answers that you'll get to the exam papers for previous years don't always do that. And when I'm back in class, or when Miss Lisk is with you, we'll explain exactly why. But for you, you should always follow that rule of thumb to use the dominant activity. Okay, so on to part 3, and part 3 is fairly straightforward. Let's go for Department 1 first. Department 1, and we're going to calculate an overhead absorption rate, and it's the overheads in Department 1 now. The total amount are 32,550, and really I should have been using this here. 32,550. We're going to divide that by, again, all we've got is machine hours, so we're going to divide it by 3,000, the number of machine hours. Okay, and when we do that, calculator time again, divided by 3,000, we get 10.85, or €10.85. And we always have to write, its unit is €10.85 per machine hour, okay? Or if it was labour, it'd be per labour hour rather. Per machine hour. Department 2. Total overheads are 25,850. And divided by 1,000 is the number of machine hours there. And that should be, it's going to be uneven. I suppose I'll show you what happens in the calculator when you do it and what to do. 850 divided by 1,000 is, oh, I thought we did 25.85. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. 25.85 per machine hour. Okay, so 25.85 per machine hour. And these are your two overhead absorption rates per machine hour that they asked you to calculate.